I didn't plan it. That's the lie I told myself later, but standing there that night, I knew something inside me had already decided. The room was quiet in that dangerous way. Too quiet, like it was waiting for me to do something irreversible. The only light came from the small lamp near the bed, warm and dim, turning shadows into secrets. My heart was beating faster than it should have, and I hadn't even moved yet. Her clothes were there. Not folded carefully, not hidden, just casually placed on the chair, as if daring me. A soft top slipping off the edge, the strap barely holding on. A skirt draped over the back, fabric flowing like it had a life of its own. I told myself not to look. I looked anyway. Just clothes, I whispered, more to calm myself than because I believed it. I reached out slowly, like the fabric might burn me. My fingers brushed it, and that was it. A shiver ran straight through my spine. The material was softer than anything I owned, lighter, almost intimate. It smelled faintly of her perfume, and suddenly my chest felt tight. This is wrong, my mind said. But another voice, quiet, patient, much older, answered back, or maybe this is honest. I locked the door. My hands shook as I pulled the top over my head. The fabric slid down my torso, touching skin that had never been touched like this before. I sucked in a breath, stunned by how right it felt, and terrified by that exact feeling. When I turned toward the mirror, my body froze. The person staring back at me wasn't a joke. Wasn't a costume. My shoulders looked softer. My posture changed without me thinking. My eyes, God, my eyes, looked different. Not because of makeup, because of recognition. No, this doesn't mean anything, I said out loud. But my reflection didn't argue, just watched me. Curious, waiting. And in that moment something cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to let a truth slip through. I wasn't borrowing her clothes anymore. I was meeting someone I had been avoiding my entire life. The next morning felt heavier than it should have. I stood in front of my closet longer than usual, staring at my clothes like they belonged to someone else. Shirts, jeans, the same safe colors, the same sharp edges. I pulled one on, but it felt wrong the moment it touched my skin. Rough, stiff, unfamiliar in a way it had never been before. This is who you are, I told myself. But my body didn't listen. At work, everything was louder, brighter, too close. I could feel my own movements like they were being monitored, even when no one was looking. Every step echoed in my ears. Every laugh nearby made my stomach tighten. "Morning," someone said as I walked in. "Morning," I replied. My voice sounded off. Not wrong, just exposed. Like I was suddenly aware of every note, every inflection. I cleared my throat and tried again. Deeper this time, more familiar. It worked. But something inside me sank. At my desk I caught myself sitting differently. Legs closer together. Back straighter. When I noticed, panic jolted through me and I forced myself to spread out, to take up space the way I always had. The movement felt exaggerated. Performative. Why am I acting? The question scared me more than the answer. In the restroom later, I avoided the mirror. But it found me anyway, reflected in the dull metal of the paper towel dispenser. For a split second I saw her again. Not fully. Just a suggestion. A softness behind my eyes. My heart raced. Someone walked in, and I jumped like I'd been caught doing something illegal. "You okay?" they asked casually while washing their hands. "Yeah. Just tired," I said quickly. They nodded and left. The door swung shut, and I leaned against the sink, breathing hard. Tired from hiding, a voice inside me whispered. By the time I got home, the pressure was unbearable. The second the door closed behind me, I kicked off my shoes and stood there, unmoving like I'd been holding my breath all day. I went straight to the room. Chair. Clothes. My hands moved on their own. When the fabric touched my skin again, my shoulders dropped. My breathing slowed. It felt like slipping into warm water after standing in the cold for too long. Relief washed over me so suddenly it almost hurt. I looked in the mirror, fully dressed now, and felt tears sting my eyes. "So this is why," I whispered. "Because the world outside demanded I be someone I was no longer sure I was. And in this quiet room, dressed in borrowed truth, I finally felt like I could breathe. But the thought that followed was terrifying. How long can I keep living two lives?" That night I didn't rush. I locked the door, turned the music low, just enough to blur the world, and stood barefoot on the cool floor. The mirror in front of me felt different now. Less threatening, more expectant, like it already knew I was coming back. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the small makeup pouch I'd hidden at the bottom of a drawer. My hands hovered for a second before touching anything. This wasn't impulse anymore. This was intention. "Okay," I whispered to myself. "Slow. Foundation first." I dabbed it carefully, watching how my skin tone evened out, how tiny imperfections softened. Each tap felt intimate, almost meditative. I leaned closer to the mirror without realizing it, studying my own face like it was a stranger I wanted to understand. Mascara was harder. My hand shook. I messed up, wiped it away, tried again. Blinked too fast. Smudged it. Laughed quietly at myself. "Relax," I murmured. "She's not in a hurry." That word slipped out naturally. My chest tightened, not with fear this time but recognition. When I finally stepped back, the change wasn't dramatic. No movie-style transformation. But it was enough. My eyes looked more open, more expressive, like they were finally allowed to say what they'd been holding back for years. I tilted my head to the left, then the right, lifted my chin slightly, softened my mouth. The movements came instinctively, as if my body had been waiting for permission. I practiced smiling, not the forced one I wore in public, but the gentle curve that felt honest. My shoulders relaxed. My stance shifted. I caught myself placing one foot slightly forward, weight resting on my hip. My breath caught. "Since when do you know how to do that?" asked the mirror. The mirror answered by showing me how right it looked. Next came the voice. I sat on the bed, spine straight, hands resting lightly on my thighs. I spoke softly at first, simple words, barely audible. "Hi." Too sharp. I tried again. Slower. Breathier. Letting the sound float instead of push. "Hi." A shiver ran through me. I spent nearly an hour like that. Talking. Whispering. Laughing quietly. Correcting myself. Each small adjustment felt like tuning an instrument I'd owned my whole life but never played. At some point I stood and walked slow laps around the room. Shorter steps. Smoother turns. I practiced sitting down again, crossing my legs carefully, instinctively smoothing the fabric over my thighs. When I finally stopped, my heart was pounding, not from fear, but from excitement so intense it scared me. I looked at myself one more time before changing back. And that's when the sadness hit, because taking it off felt like saying goodbye. As I folded the clothes carefully like they mattered, I realized something terrifying and beautiful all at once. This wasn't pretending. This wasn't fantasy. This was practice. And practice meant intention. Intention meant direction. And direction meant inevitability. I turned off the light, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling with a small, knowing smile. Tomorrow I wouldn't just be hiding anymore. I would be waiting. I stood at the door for a long time. Too long. My hand was already on the handle, fingers curled tight, but my body refused to move. I could hear my own breathing, slow, controlled, deliberate, like I was about to step onto a stage instead of a quiet street. "This is stupid," I whispered. "Just a few minutes," I answered myself right after. I checked my reflection one last time. Nothing loud. Nothing dramatic. Just enough makeup to soften my face. Just enough shape in my clothes to change the way I moved. I pulled the hoodie on top, half hiding, half protecting. The door opened with a soft click. Cold air brushed against my cheeks, and it felt different than it ever had before. Sharper. More real. Like the world was touching me, not the role I usually played. Each step away from the house made my heart beat faster. I could feel my hips moving slightly, naturally, before I even noticed. Corrected myself, then stopped. Why? No one had said anything. No one was watching. Car passed. Headlights swept over me for half a second. I flinched instinctively, shoulders rising, chin tucking down. When the light moved on, I realized I was still standing there. Still okay. I reached the corner store, the same one I'd been to 100 times before. Just not like this. My palms were damp. My throat felt tight. In and out, I told myself. No eye contact. No talking if you can avoid it. The bell above the door chimed. The sound felt like an announcement. I stepped inside. The air smelled like detergent and snacks. Familiar. My feet carried me forward before my fear could catch up. Evening, the cashier said without looking up. For a split second my mind went blank. Then I answered. Evening. The word came out softer than I expected. Lighter. My chest tightened, waiting for a reaction. The cashier glanced up. Smile. Just a normal smile. Take your time. That was it. No confusion. No double take. No questions. My knees almost gave out. I grabbed something random, didn't even care what it was, and placed it on the counter. As she rang it up, a woman behind me shifted her weight, standing just close enough that I could feel her presence. She didn't move away. She didn't step back. She stood there like I belonged in that space. Have a good night, the cashier said, handing me the receipt. You too, I replied. This time my voice didn't shake. When I stepped back outside, the door closed behind me with the same soft click, but I wasn't the same person who had opened it. I walked home slowly, deliberately, head up, shoulders relaxed. Halfway there I realized I was smiling. Not nervously, not apologetically, just smiling. Because the world hadn't ended. Because no one had taken anything from me. Because for the first time being seen didn't feel like danger. It felt like permission. And as I unlocked the door and stepped back inside, one thought echoed clearly in my mind. If this felt this right, what happens next? The next morning the confidence was gone. I woke up with a knot in my stomach, the kind that doesn't come from hunger but from memory. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, soft and innocent, completely unaware of what I'd done the night before. For a few seconds I just lay there. Then it hit me. The walk, the store, the voice, the smile. My chest tightened. What the hell are you doing? I muttered, sitting up too fast. The room looked normal again. Too normal. My regular clothes lay folded on the chair like silent judges. The hoodie from last night was gone, tucked away, hidden, like proof of a crime. I went to the bathroom and turned on the light. The mirror didn't show her anymore. Showed me. Sharp edges. Familiar lines. The version of myself everyone expected. I leaned closer, searching, almost desperately, for even a trace of last night. Nothing. A wave of panic washed over me. Maybe it was just a phase. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe I went too far. I pressed my palms against the sink, breathing hard. This isn't you, I told my reflection firmly. You're just confused. But the words felt rehearsed, forced, like something I'd been taught to say, not something I truly believed. All day the thoughts wouldn't stop. At work I felt like an imposter in my own body. Every joke felt hollow. Every conversation felt like acting. When someone laughed and clapped me on the shoulder, the touch made my skin crawl. Not because it was wrong, but because it reminded me how disconnected I felt. I don't know. They can't know. The fear twisted into guilt. What about family? What about expectations? What about the life you already have? By evening, the pressure was unbearable. I went home and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed drawer where I kept everything hidden. Just stop, I whispered. If you stop now, it'll go away. I stood up, opened the drawer, then closed it again. My hands were shaking. Tears blurred my vision. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet ones that slipped out without permission. I covered my face, shoulders curling inward, feeling smaller than I had in years. I can't be this, I said softly. But I can't not be either. That was the worst part. There was no going back to ignorance. No undoing the way it had felt to breathe freely, to walk without armor, to exist without apology, even for a few minutes. The crash wasn't about shame. It was about loss. 'Cause now I knew what peace felt like. And I knew exactly what it cost to give it up. I wiped my face, took a shaky breath, and opened the drawer again. This time I didn't close it. Started with a look. Not the obvious kind. Not shock. Just curiosity that lingered half a second too long. We were sitting together, normal setting, normal conversation. I was laughing at something small, something unimportant when I noticed it. Pause. The way their eyes searched my face instead of passing over it like they used to. "You've changed," they said casually, stirring their drink. My heart skipped. "What?" They shrugged. "I don't know. You're quieter." Then suddenly lighter. And then gone again. Forced a laugh. "Everyone changes." "Not like this," they replied gently. Too gently. Silence settled between us. Thick and uncomfortable. I became painfully aware of how I was sitting. Legs tucked in, hands folded, posture softer than usual. I shifted abruptly, trying to correct myself. They noticed. "There," they said softly. "That." My mouth went dry. "I don't mean it badly," they added quickly. Are you okay?" The question cracked something open. 'Cause okay meant explaining. And explaining meant risk. "I'm fine," I said automatically. They held my gaze. Didn't push. Didn't accuse. Just waited. That was worse. "I've just been tired," I continued too fast. "Thinking a lot." "About what?" I looked down at my hands. They didn't look like mine anymore, not really. They felt like hands that wanted to be held, not clenched into fists. "About who I am," I said quietly. The words hung there, fragile. They nodded slowly. "That makes sense." No shock. No judgment. Just space. "I don't have the right words yet," I admitted. "And I'm scared that if I say them wrong, I won't be able to take them back." They leaned back slightly, giving me room. "Then don't say them yet. Just don't disappear either." My chest ached. Because that was exactly what I'd been doing. Disappearing in plain sight. When I got home that night, I didn't go straight to the drawer. I went to the mirror. I stood there in my regular clothes and tried to imagine living the rest of my life like this. Measured, edited, careful. Always monitoring myself. Always hiding the part that felt most alive. My throat tightened. "I can't keep pretending this isn't real," I whispered. For the first time, the thought didn't terrify me. Steadied me. Because if someone could see the change, feel it, then maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was truth trying to surface. And maybe the real danger wasn't being discovered. Maybe it was going back into silence. That morning something felt settled. Not calm. Not confident. Just inevitable. I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, wearing the clothes everyone expected me to wear. They fit. They always had. But now they felt like a costume I was tired of returning to the rack every night. My reflection stared back, unreadable. "You don't have to decide today," I told myself. But my body didn't believe me. At work, the tension followed me like a shadow. Conversations paused when I walked in. Not dramatically, just subtly enough to make my skin prickle. Caught people looking twice, then looking away. Not because I looked different on the outside, but because I moved differently. I noticed it too late. The way I stood closer when listening. The way my hands spoke before my mouth did. The softness I stopped correcting halfway through the day because I was exhausted. In a meeting, I leaned forward to make a point and heard my own voice. Clear, steady, lighter than it used to be. No one interrupted. No one laughed. They listened. And that scared me more than ridicule ever could. During the break, I overheard a whisper. "Have you noticed?" "Yeah." I thought it was just me. My stomach dropped. I locked myself in the restroom, palms flat against the door, heart racing. The mirror above the sink caught my reflection. Tired eyes, tense jaw. Someone standing at the edge of a decision they hadn't planned to make in public. "You're losing control," I whispered. But another thought followed immediately. "Or you're losing the lie." I splashed water on my face, trying to ground myself. When I looked up again, something surprised me. I didn't look ashamed. I looked scared, yes, but also ready. When I stepped back out, the air felt thicker. Like the room knew something I was still pretending not to. Someone smiled at me, hesitant but kind. Another nodded, as if acknowledging something unspoken. No one confronted me. They didn't need to. By the end of the day, my nerves were shot. I packed up slowly, hands trembling just enough to be noticeable. To myself at least. As I walked out of the building, I realized this wasn't about being exposed. This was about being seen before I had finished explaining myself. And for the first time, instead of panic, I felt something else rise up beneath the fear. Resolve. Because if the world was already noticing, then maybe the next step shouldn't be smaller. Maybe it should be honest. I didn't change my mind. That's what surprised me the most. I stood in my room, clothes laid out on the bed. Not hidden, not rushed. Chosen. Carefully. Intentionally. My hands were steady as I got dressed. Like my body already knew this moment was coming, even if my mind had spent years avoiding it. There was no hoodie this time. No extra layer to blur the edges. The fabric hugged me differently, shaping me instead of armoring me. When I looked in the mirror, my breath caught. Not because I was shocked, but because I recognized myself fully for the first time. "This is it," I whispered. My makeup was simple, clean, confident. Not an experiment anymore. Not practice. It was me. My posture shifted naturally as I stood there. Shoulders relaxed. Chin level. Is clear. I didn't rehearse excuses. I didn't plan explanations. I just opened the door. The moment I stepped outside, my senses went sharp. Every sound felt louder. Every step felt deliberate. The world didn't slow down for me, but I did. I walked like I had nowhere else to be, like I belonged exactly where I was. People noticed. Course they did. A glance that lingered. Double take. A brief pause before someone looked away. My heart hammered, but I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize with my body the way I used to. Kept walking. At the cafe, my usual place, I pushed the door open and felt the weight of the room shift. Conversations dipped, then resumed. I walked to the counter, hands resting calmly in front of me. "What can I get you?" the barista asked. Their eyes met mine, and they smiled. Not polite, not confused, just warm. As I answered, my voice didn't waver. That's when I knew. The fear was still there, but it wasn't driving anymore. Later, when I crossed paths with people who knew me before, the air thickened. One of them stared openly, confusion written across their face. "Hey," they said slowly. "Is that?" "Yes," I replied gently. I didn't explain further. I didn't need to. Silence stretched between us, heavy and fragile. Then they nodded, awkwardly, but sincerely. "Okay," they said. Okay. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. As I walked home, the sun dipping low, I realized something profound. The climax wasn't the reveal. The climax was the moment I stopped asking permission to exist. The days after didn't explode into drama. They unfolded. Slow mornings, familiar streets, ordinary moments that felt brand new because I was new inside them. I stopped rushing through mirrors. I stopped bracing for impact every time someone looked at me. The tension in my shoulders, there for as long as I could remember, began to loosen. I learned who stayed. Some people asked careful questions. Some asked none at all and simply adjusted, like this version of me had always been waiting nearby. A few drifted away quietly, not out of cruelty but discomfort. I let them go. I was done chasing safety at the cost of truth. One evening I sat with a small group, laughing, legs tucked in, hands relaxed in my lap, and realized something startling. I wasn't monitoring myself. I wasn't counting gestures. I wasn't editing my voice. I wasn't holding my breath. "I like you like this," someone said casually, passing me a drink. "You seem lighter." I smiled, the kind that reaches the eyes. "I feel lighter." Later, alone in my room, I opened the drawer and smiled at how unnecessary it felt now. These weren't secrets anymore. Just clothes, just tools, just expressions of a self I no longer needed to hide. I stood in front of the mirror, no performance, no fear, and said my name softly. Then the one that felt right. Both felt like mine, finally aligned instead of at war. I choose you, I whispered. And for the first time I meant it without conditions. Empowerment didn't arrive as fireworks. It arrived as peace. As walking without apology. As letting myself take up space. As knowing that even on hard days, I would not abandon myself again. I look in the mirror now and see someone who doesn't flinch. Someone who borrowed clothes one night and found herself. Someone who stumbled, fell, hid, doubted, but never let fear decide who she would be. The world still stares sometimes. Whispers still float. But it no longer shapes me. I step outside, chest open, head high, and feel the weight lift with every step. To anyone watching this, feeling that same pull, the fear, the curiosity, the thrill that comes with discovery, listen closely. You are not broken. You are not alone. Be brave enough to borrow a piece of yourself from the unknown. Be patient enough to practice. Be bold enough to show the world who you truly are. Because the moment you stop hiding, the moment you let yourself exist fully, that's when freedom begins. And for the first time in my life, I don't just exist. I live.